Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now. Welcome to the Stoa. I'm Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa, and the Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this moment. And today we have Vince Horn joining us. And I guess I'll say how this sort of came about. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they thought that the Stoa was a really good example of something called the Metta. And he meant it in non-Buddhist, like Buddhistic terms, sort of like a space that can house a lot of wisdom and spiritual traditions that don't necessarily talk or speak with one another. And the Stoa is sort of like a meta home for all this. And so I Googled that term, and then I saw Vince Horn wrote an excellent article about it, and it just really landed. And so I reached out to Vince and like, hey, do you want to come to the Stoa to talk about the Metta Sangha? He's like, yeah, no, but I want to talk about social meditation. I'm like, oh, even better, after reading some of the content that he provided me about social meditation. And so we set this session up, and how it's going to work, I'm going to hand it to Vince in a moment, and it's going to be a mixture of kind of a talk and a practice session. So that being said, I will take in Vince.
All right, thanks, Peter. Hey, everybody, good to see you. Good to meet you. My name is Vince Horn. I'm based in North Carolina on the East Coast of the U.S. And I live in my home where I've been for the last 4 months, seemingly without end. I'm sure some of you can relate. But it's good to be here, and I was excited to receive this invitation from Peter. And I've been watching the Stoa since it arose recently, and I've participated in a couple sessions, including yesterday with Bonita Roy on her psychotechnology playground. So I've been loving what's arising in this community, and thank you again for having me. I thought the Metta Sangha is a really interesting idea, but I thought, it would just end up being kind of an abstract conversation about meta systematic, like community. And I don't really have a bunch to say about it because I'm, to be honest, still trying to figure out how to actually build these spaces. And so I don't have much to say on them because it doesn't seem clear to me exactly how to do that. But I think one of the pieces that might be helpful, or one piece that I could imagine being useful in creating spaces where people are practicing across different traditional contexts, is to have interpersonal practices available, practices that we can do together. And of course, social meditation is nothing new. Since people have been meditating, which is probably since human beings were, we've been contemplating, meditating together. You can look back at the history of the kind of Indic traditions and see these incredible examples of social chanting, of everyone chanting over and over again out loud together and getting into this deep sense of collective flow or trance. And I think it's really only been in the last couple hundred years with the advent of modernity that it seems like meditation has become something new or different, the way we kind of currently understand it. And that is as a solo kind of self-improvement project. Meditation is something we do to improve ourselves or develop our capacities or, become better at not reacting to our, impulses or, that's the kind of vision of modern meditation. Everyone can be their own authority, and everyone can follow their own path. And I think there's something beautiful about that. But I've practiced in that context quite a bit. That's where I began. But I also found it quite also limiting to be focused primarily on my own experience all of the time. And so when I first encountered the practice of social meditation about 10 years ago from one of my own teachers, it was like it was a bit of a revelation to me, because I'd spent about a year or so up to that point on silent retreat. In my 20s, I spent a year in total, not all at once, in silence, meditating for 10 to 12 hours a day. And that was a great experience, except that meditation and it became this thing that, like, it was only happening in my inner world. And if I could find some people who I could talk to about it, which were rare, then we could have this sort of esoteric conversation about all our weird mystical experiences. And that was great, but it felt like something that was very isolated from others, from other people, from the rest of the world. It felt like this thing that just existed in my own mind. And so to actually verbalize and to meditate out loud with another person, it made me realize, of course, it doesn't have to be that way. We could actually meditate together again. And maybe we could do that in a new way, where we're not all just trying to become one with the same mantra. What if instead there was a way to acknowledge the diversity of experience that can arise in our collective experiences, and yet not all just be experiencing that diversity internally while we sit together in silence. So for me, social meditation is a practice of bringing meditation out of just one's inner experience and into a collective process of investigation, of listening, curiosity. So I'd like today to offer a couple of social meditation practices for this group, with this group. And these are very much peer-to-peer practices. So if you find them helpful and you want to share them, you can. One, because they're open source, and two, because anyone can facilitate these practices. The instructions are quite simple. Actually doing them is the challenging part. So today I wanted to offer a couple examples of social meditation practice, and to do the practices together, maybe like 5 or 10 minute period of practice, and then to open up after each of these practices and just check in and say, hey, how was that for you? What did you notice? Were there any questions that came up for you? Any insights that you had? Any challenges that occurred? So there'll just be an open space for discussion after we do each of these two techniques. That's what I'd like to propose for our time today. The two techniques that I have in mind, one is just a simple mindfulness practice, and it comes out of a technique called social noting. And in noting meditation, traditionally, this is a Buddhist practice, traditionally one would sit eyes closed by oneself and to internally note or label what's arising moment to moment, to give a 1 or 2 word label to identify, okay, this is what's happening right now. And in the practice of social noting, the only difference is we do it out loud with other people. So that's the big, that's the big innovation. And it's surprisingly, not more people have thought of this. And yet, when we do that, my experience after having done the noting practice internally for, 3,000 or so hours, I started to do it out loud, and I found, wow, this is a different practice, actually. It both is and isn't a different practice. It's different because now I'm able to hear other people's experience, what they're experiencing. And not only that, I can model my experience. And if you're able to meditate with someone out loud who has a few thousand hours of experience under their belt, it's incredibly helpful to see how they actually practice, what they actually experience, which is, by the way, no different than what each of us experiences. And sometimes it's just that, it's just having someone acknowledge, oh, there's anger, there's frustration, there's a self-aggrandizing thought. Oh, okay, yeah, just like me. Maybe I could actually let this anger or let this self-referential thinking. Maybe I could actually notice that it's there and acknowledge that this is true for me too. And I think that's the beauty of social meditation. You know, we can see each other's humanity. So the first practice I'd like to offer is it's a mindfulness-based practice in which we will just moment to moment be noticing what we're experiencing. And the form of that, of this practice is called there is noting. There is noting. This technique was developed by the teacher that I mentioned earlier, Kenneth Folk, who had the bright idea of doing these practices out loud with other people. And the reason he did that actually was pedagogical. He decided that the traditional method of teaching Vipassana or mindfulness practice, this noting practice in particular, didn't work that well. So traditionally you'd go to a monk, and the monk would give you the instructions, and then you go off and you practice the instructions by yourself. And then at some point in the future, whether it's an hour or a day or a week or month or even longer, you'd come back and report on your first person experience. You say, okay, when I did that, this is what happened. And then the monk would hear you. For a lot of my teachers, they'd be working with an Asian monk. So then they'd have to deal with the translation challenges between English and in this case, Burmese. And then the teacher would offer them feedback and instructions. Okay, do this now, try this, modify this. And the problem with that is there's so many different places in this way of learning meditation where we can not understand each other, where there's some kind of miscommunication. And then there's such a huge long time between the initial receiving of the instructions and getting feedback on it. So the learning loop, the feedback loop of how quickly we can actually understand, put into practice, and then refine our technique is extraordinarily long. And what Kenneth discovered is if you just do it out loud with another person and you just take turns, for instance, going back and forth, noting out loud what you're experiencing, there's seeing, there's thinking, there's dryness, there's investigating, there's nervousness, there's allowing, there's uncertainty, there's breathing. If you do that, then very quickly you can sort of see, oh, okay, this is how the practice works. Oh, okay, got it. Ah, okay, the thing that you just noted there, that's more of a thought than it is a sensation, right? It's like there is a fan moving above in the ceiling. It's like, oh, actually, no, there's seeing. You could actually make that more simple. So you can offer feedback and you kind of very quickly refine the technique. So this practice arose as an attempt to improve the pedagogy of teaching meditation. And then the side effect is that it becomes interpersonal, intersubjective. So in this practice, the instructions are, we're gonna break out into small groups of say 3 to 4 people each. And we're gonna have about 10 minutes to just take turns noting our experience as it's arising, saying there is, and then using a word or two to describe what your current experience is like. And this is your current sensory experience. You know, what are you sensing right now? What are you seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, thinking? Feel free to use any words you like that help describe that experience in this practice. So there's a creative component to this. Sometimes we call this freestyle noting because whatever you want to note is okay. Whatever words you want to use to describe your experience are fine. And then the other important thing I want to say about social meditation is it's always also okay to not participate in the verbal out loud component. Because as I'm sure some of you have experienced, you know, social anxiety is a real thing. And sometimes it's not appropriate perhaps to open up and share our experience. Maybe we need to actually, ease our way into that kind of level of vulnerability. My wife often says trust is earned. So if you don't want to just come blazing into just open sharing what you're experiencing, you're also very welcome to participate in this practice as a witness. So you can take the role of witness, of just silently observing and participating through that silent presence. So know that that's also an option in this practice. And I'll probably ask if anyone wants to do that beforehand, so we can just identify and we can know who's witnessing, so we don't kind of expect each other to be doing something we're not. Social expectations. Yeah, big part of social meditation. So let me stop here. Are there any questions so far about the instructions or social meditation?
Yeah, is there like you share one thing and then they pass it to the next person, or you share for like a minute, just whatever is arising?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So when it's your turn, and we're going to sort of take turns in this exercise, when it's your turn, you'll just say there is, and then a word or two to describe your current experience, and then it'll be the next person's turn. So if we were going to demonstrate this, say if Peter, if you and I were going to demonstrate this, and we were going to go back and forth, and then maybe we can pull in Travis as well, since they're going to be 3 or 4 people, so we could sort of demonstrate what this will look like with a small group. Would you guys be up for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so we'll just do a few rounds here so you can see what there is noting looks like. There's sitting.
There is hunger.
There is touch.
There is relaxing.
There is thirst.
There is hearing.
There is breathing.
There's sight.
There is lightness.
There is energy.
There is opening.
There is tingling.
There is anticipating.
There is performance.
There is movement.
There is gratitude. Thank you. So that's a perfect example of how this practice works. Thank you. Any other questions, Sarah?
Are there any recommendations for eyes open, eyes closed, sitting, standing?
In the context of these instructions, that's not specified. So it's up to you. Any other questions? Does anyone know that they'd like to take the witnessing stance during this exercise to check out what it's like to be a silent observer? Any witnesses? Maybe the way I framed that made it sound like if you're a witness, that means you can't handle intimacy. It's not true. You can. It's just it's a cool way to experience the practice as well. Okay. Great. So we'll all be participating in the out loud part, and again, we'll do this in groups of 3 to 4, and we'll have about 10 minutes. So we'll just break out. You'll be in your group. Someone will start to note. Someone will go next. And then after that, just like Peter, Travis, and I did, and then you've established an order, and you can just keep kind of taking turns in that order. And again, we'll come back here after 10 minutes and just check in to see how it went. All right, welcome back. Looks like most everyone is still here, so I'm gonna assume this was a successful practice. Good job. Anyone want to share anything about how that was for you, or any questions that came up in doing the practice? Welcome, Kate.
I'll just say it was flat out fun. At least
You had fun.
Yes.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add a different energy of being pulled away from distraction due to the group's energy in a space. It's not like myself. Whoops, I forgot. Like that kind of wasn't going to happen because there was some social pressure to stay with it. And that is a really interesting, different kind of flavor. Really.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Benjamin. So in a way, I would re-say what you said, like,
Please.
no, I think you said it beautifully. I would say like we're distracted from our distractions by other people's experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Exactly. Yeah. More dynamic.
Thank you.
And so
Travis, and then someone else. Yeah.
there was sometimes large upswellings of energy, like if one of us went out of turn, or if somebody said something that maybe was funny or something, all of a sudden the energy would rise and then it would settle down again. That was a fairly common occurrence throughout the course of the 10 minutes.
Right. Awesome.
I'm a longtime student, both in practice and academically, of Buddhism. And so it was fun to see, oh my gosh, here's impermanence. Last time it was my turn, I wasn't noticing this. I'm noticing something else. And it's really basic, but it was entertaining and instructive just to see things change, things shift.
Thank you, David.
There was something that I noticed, it was compared to like some of like the solo meditation that I've been doing. I had to like actively like hold myself back and like let go of things, because like every time someone said something, you know, like there is X, you know, I just kind of wanted to be like, you know, like what makes you say that? Where's that coming from? Like every single time I just wanted to just like dive into it, but you know, it wasn't my turn and I couldn't even say that. So I had to like just let it go, which was really interesting.
What kinds of things did you end up noting frequently? There is letting go, or
usually around the time it got back to me, I would have been like distracted by something else. Like I've basically been in like a little bit of like a fog for a while, so there's like, you know, like soreness, fatigue there, and my back has just been terrible today. So there are lots of like physical stuff, or just sometimes I think I said like I noted some sensation and I could sense like the various reactions that had down the chain. You know, I could just sort of like see everyone's reaction was a reaction of that, which sort of like came back to me. And so when it came back to me, I was just like, yeah, I feel pride, you know, like that. It was interesting.
Thank you, Samuel.
I just want to say, I came into this session with extreme anxiety. I was feeling very on edge, very emotional. And now I have complete stillness, and it's nullified everything. So it's just great.
Well, glad to hear that. Could have gone the other way, but glad to hear that was true for you. Yeah, thank you.
I'll go.
Paul.
Yeah, at first it felt like we were just sort of saying things in my experience, and then all of a sudden I felt myself sinking into like a bit of a we space. And then it felt very like there were a lot of things that happened. I forget how someone else said it, but things popping up, distractions, and it felt like I was part of like some sort of song or something. There was like a rhythm to it. There were different qualities that were emerging, which is really nice to be a part of.
Nice. Thank you. Beautiful description.
I found it particularly impressive when the sun came out from behind the clouds, the light went up, and it was like my light went up too. My consciousness was going up.
Nice. So the sun brightened you, or maybe your whole group. Nice. That's great. Anyone find this? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I found that I was more like felt like I should give context for other people, but then also like maybe that's not the practice. Like if I was doing this on my own, I probably would just say, you know, there is smelling. And then when I'm saying it to people, I'm like, well, they're going to want to know what it's maybe vegetables. You know, there is smelling, maybe cooking vegetables or something. You know, like but that seems also like silly somehow. But I noticed that I was doing that.
I mean, it sounds to me like maybe that's part of the social conditioning, you know, that we all carry. Like smelling, like I could be smelling my own farts, right? You know, you don't want people to think you're smelling your own body odor. So, so I mean, that could be one reason to want context. You know? Makes sense. But this practice doesn't give you that, doesn't afford that. So instead, we're left seeing our conditioning. Yeah. Thank you.
I seldom smell myself until I'm really far down, far gone.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, it has to be pretty intense.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you all for trying this practice. I wanted to maybe do one more practice and have a chance to check in about that. So this next practice, we did a sort of mindfulness practice to begin with. And here I'd like to offer a heartfulness practice to kind of incline the mind toward opening the heart. So that's, to me, the practice of heartfulness. It doesn't mean we will experience an open heart. It just means we're pointing our intention, the GPS of our heart in that direction. So here, the next practice, this practice is very simple. It's called spontaneous thanks. And in this practice, the instructions are in your small group, whenever you feel moved, this is the spontaneous part, feel free to say out loud, thank you. That's it. That's the practice. Are there any questions?
Everybody is saying thank you and nothing else?
Yes, when you feel moved, as you feel moved to say it. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like you could say this is a gratitude practice, if you like. It's focused on cultivating, developing gratefulness. It's even a devotional practice if you orient in that way. It can be. Any other questions? In this practice, you're also welcome to witness whenever you want, because if you don't feel moved to say thank you, then you're witnessing. So, thank you. All right. Any other questions? We haven't done it yet, but you're welcome. You're very welcome. And I'd say thanks to ketamine also for this practice, because I was doing some ketamine with some friends, and this practice started happening, and I was like, oh, we could do that too without drugs. Not that I don't think it's fun to do both. But, any other questions? Okay. So again, we'll go for about 10 minutes in this practice in small groups of 3 to 4. And if you don't feel moved at any time to say thank you, you're welcome to be silent. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy. All right, thank you. Welcome back. So we've got just a few minutes here, but if anyone has anything you'd like to share, observations, experience, questions, please.
Yeah, I had this moment of intense social anxiety because somebody sneezed and I just spontaneously said, "Oh, bless you." And then I thought, oh, for anyone whose eyes are closed, that is going to sound really weird. So I sort of went off script and then felt anxious about that. but it was a beautiful session. Thank you.
Yeah, having been in that group with you, I felt like it was a beautiful off-script moment from my point of view. I was like, oh, cool. She's modifying the instructions. This is good. That's how new forms emerge in this practice.
Right.
Now we have the bless you practice.
New forms come from social anxiety. It's
And
great.
sneezes. Yeah.
Well, it did fit for me. There are different times where I felt moved to verbalize, and others where anything that happened, a sneeze, a blessing, anything that happened, I was thankful for. And then there's sort of, not to overstate it, but generally there wasn't a whole lot of me anymore. There was just thankfulness. Everything that happened thanked itself or was received gratefully.
I'll sort of add to what David said, because that occurred at the beginning, and as we sort of settled in with each other, it got quieter and quieter and quieter, and there was less distinction for me to be joyful or thankful about. It just got really, really quiet.
Well, it came really easy to me because I used to be in a Sufi group, and that's what it was all about, spinning the heart energy. And so I just started off doing alhamdulillah. I think that means like
alhamdulillah.
And and I went through different masters like that. And eventually I just got into like being grateful for beingness, for like emptiness and appearance, brings together like things in solidity.
I have a few things to share and then a question. One was I think I noticed for me that it was a little bit more difficult to access a thankfulness that would get to threshold where I'd say thank you when I had my eyes open versus eyes closed. I noticed that for me it was quite distinctly like a feeling that kind of tended to like be somewhere kind of between like my heart center and like jaw area. And yeah, I was wondering like if you've ever experienced it where like the thankfulness that people express gets to like a point of kind of like hysterical thankfulness, like deep, like, oh my God, thank you kind of thankfulness.
Yeah. In some sessions, I've seen that.
Yeah, I had a welling up of gratitude. I just wanted to like say thank you, and not stop. And the other thing I noticed was that the word thank just felt so weird. Like thank, like what is that? But it's also associated with that positive energy.
I noticed that there was a period of time where the feeling moved started happening in a continuous state. It was like flowing.
Yeah.
And then I recognized that I have these weird metacognitive structures, because it was like, oh, now that it's flowing, do I feel moved, or is it like acceleration where, you only feel the change and now that it's just flowing, I don't know if I feel moved or it's just moving. And I was like, what does he mean by the instruction? Is it a continuous thank you, or is it just at the deceleration and acceleration points that you say it?
Great question.
I think in my room and in our room, I went from a state of happiness to humor to a hypnotic trance, and then to heartfeltness. And I
Hey,
think that sums up the
keeping
session.
keeping the H's going. That's good. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to honor your time. So maybe we could start to wrap here. And thank you. Peter, back to you, my friend.
Yes. So in a moment, I guess I'll talk about upcoming events, but thank you, Vince, for coming today and suggesting this excellent session. And you also suggested that it could be an ongoing session at at the Stoa. And so it could be like a rotating facilitator type thing too, maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Cause I thought that was quite fun. So yeah, that's something maybe we'll throw in the calendar of the Wisdom Gym. So for upcoming events, I don't even know what, my mind's kind of, what do we have tomorrow? We have a mimetic mediator campfire tomorrow. So if you're interested in mimetic mediation, or you want to know what that even means, you can come to the session at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's tomorrow. And maybe AJ, if you want to plug your Shame Bootcamp for next week.
Yeah, I do a Shame Bootcamp every Thursday at 6. And coming up this coming Thursday, we're just going to be sharing some low-level shame stories and practicing empathy with each other. So it's like a really nice give and take of vulnerability and acceptance.
Very cool. I definitely recommend checking that out. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming up today.